Buddham sharanam gacchami, dharmam sharanam gacchami, sangam sharanam gacchami. I go to seek refuge in the Buddha. I go to seek refuge in the dharma, the religion. I go to seek refuge in the Sangha, the organization. These are the three gems of Buddhism. For more than 2,400 years, these words of the Buddha have thrilled and inspired innumerable spiritual aspirants towards what is called Nirvana. As he sits down finally before the Bodhi tree, this is the way he sat down. There you can see. And that is the tree, something like the tree. I'll chant his words and then I'll translate it. Yasane shushatu me shariram tvakasti mansam pralayanstayatu aprapya bodhim bahukalpa durlabam naiva sanat kayamatas salipyate. Let my body dry up on the seat. Let my skin, flesh and bones wither away. I shall not move from this seat without enlightenment, which is difficult to attain in many cycles of creation. One thing is clear, that Nirvana is not for the asking. You ask and you get it. You've got to struggle for it. To understand Nirvana, one has to understand the doctrines which led him to this state which he experienced. And to understand his doctrines, one has to understand a little bit of his life. So we will dwell on his life, his doctrines, and what he experienced. What is Nirvana? It's a state, it's a transcendental state which is free from suffering, pain, individual existence, in short, samsara. That's. What is Nirvana? You cannot separate Nirvana from the Buddha. So what is the Buddha? Buddha, it comes from the Sanskrit root Budh, to awaken, to understand, to know. That's it. So was he the Buddha? No, he wasn't a Buddha to begin with. He ended up being a Buddha. Is this state, as mentioned in the Buddhist scriptures? The Buddhist scriptures are vast. It's called the three baskets, Tripitaka. Really, really vast. And then the commentaries on it have proliferated. Even today, the amount of literature in Buddhism is being churned out every year. I mean, at a very phenomenal rate. Not only in English, but in... So 2,500 years after he was born, Buddha still captures our imagination. One time, Swami Vijnanananda, that is, many of you must have heard of this. He was a disciple of Shri Ramakrishna, and he was the guru of Swami Swahananda, who was here for many, many, many years. So on his trip to Sarnath, that's a place near the holy city of Benares, he was standing before the statue of the Buddha. And he experienced, as he said, a vast ocean of light. And he himself was like a tiny speck in that ocean of light. And gradually there was a sound. But it was so sweet and so full of joy. And then that sound also merged. And there was nothing else except that ocean of light. He said, somehow my consciousness returned after a while. But he was full of bliss. That is Nirvana. A vast ocean of light and love and sweetness and joy. We have the idea that, oh, it's a dry state. Realization is a dry state. What? No. The later light writers, they wanted to separate themselves from the mother church. Hinduism had, for thousands of years, it was already ancient by the time Buddha arose. It had multiplied its rituals and mythology and philosophical discussions to such an extent that people were losing sight of the essential message of the Vedas. And Buddhism was a kind of a reform movement within the mother church. It's like Christianity arose from from Judaism. The mother church. The mother church never went on to convert people. Buddhism did, and it was the first missionary religion. And they did it through philosophical discussions, the strength of their character, and their realization. They did not go around with fire and sword. You come on my side, or I'm going to kill you. That was that moral character of these early missionaries, the Buddhist bhikkhus, so to say. Swami Vivekananda says, Buddhism is historically the most important religion because it was the most tremendous religious movement that the world ever saw, a most gigantic spiritual wave ever to burst upon human society. There is no civilization on which its effect has not been felt in some way. He further continues, that man set in motion the highest moral ideas any nation can have. Wherever there is a moral code, it is a ray of light from that man. So here it was. It was a kind of he had a tremendous personality. And we see in his life that just his personality, which drove him initially to seek the answers of why existence is coupled with suffering. Can't we just exist and not suffer? And these were the burning questions that actually troubled him day and night. Religion has three paths, more or less. The first is the mythology, then the rituals, and then the highest one is the metaphysics or philosophy. Buddha railed against the metaphysics, railed against too much of ritualism, and also the mythology. Technically, that made Buddhism a non-religion. But after he passed away, his followers, they kept him in the center of their attention, and they built a kind of a ritual, a system of rituals. They built mythology, and his cryptic sayings were expanded into these philosophical schools. So here we are, a non-religion then becomes. So how did he counter these existing arguments about God and about a soul and what? He based his teachings on the real nature of a person. The psychological, you can say, the person. And his system of ethics was so watertight, you couldn't counter it. Because here is a man, he studied it, and he built a system of ethics and psychology on it. Most of the arguments today against God and soul and religion on YouTube and literature and all these things are just baby's prattle. If anyone reads Buddhism, you'll find that Buddha and his followers employed these arguments thousands of years ago. Yes, it's nothing new. They haven't come up with something new. If they come, then we can see what it is. To come down to his life, Buddha was born in the Shakya clan. There was, in the old days, every tribe, there was a tribe, and then the tribe grew into a clan. So it was named Shakya. And as a result, he was called a Shakyamuni, the sage of the Shakyas. He was also from the ancient lineage of the sage Gautama. So he was called Gautama. His given name was Siddhartha, one whose aim has been fulfilled. So he was called Siddhartha Gautama or Shakyamuni, the sage of the Shakya, Shakya Singha, the lion of the Shakya clan. Some of the authors of the Encyclopedia of Religions speak of him. And they are quite critical. But in this case, we find a tremendous appreciation for this character. Buddha was the greatest ever to have lived on this earth, and who has influenced the life and thought of more than half the human race because of the nobility of his character, the vastness of his vision, the depth of his compassion, and the profundity of his teaching. It is inevitable that this kind of life will be idealized. And over the years, we've had the most ancient biography called the Buddha Charita and the Lalita Vistara. And over again, this has been researched, and this new, you can say, discoveries are coming out about his life even today. So, technically, he was born in 568 before Common Era. There are a couple of authors who like to push him a little century even behind. But Mrs. Rhys Davids, the great scholar who studied both the two main branches of Buddhism, the southern and the northern school, she pins the date down 568 before Common Era. It was, as you know, yesterday we had the Buddha Purnima, and we had a celebration of the Buddha Purnima. There we are. And it was a full moon day, and it's called a thrice blessed day because he was born on that day. He attained Nirvana, and he also attained the final parinirvana. That's the final, you can say, going away. So that's the reason why it's called a thrice blessed day. He was born in a royal family of, they say, the Kshatriyas. And he was, you can see a lot of parallels between the life of Christ as well as the life of, you can say, the Gautama Buddha. You find that his mother was Maya Devi, Maya. She was noble and pure soul, and even before Buddha was born, during her pregnancy, she had innumerable visions foretelling of the greatness of this child who is going to be born. When it was time for delivering the baby, as is usual in India, they leave and go to their parents' house. As on her way, she gave birth to the child in the grove called Lumbini, which is now in Nepal. His father, Shuddhodana, one whose food is pure, he was a kind of a petty king, rather a chieftain, not a big kingdom. And the child, when he was born, there were sages and saints and astrologers who came drawn by his birth, kind of subconsciously. They came with gifts, they came to see the child, and astrologers, they drew his horoscope and said, this will be the light of the world. Edwin Arnold, when he first wrote The Life of the Buddha, he titled this book by Light of the World, the Light of Asia. Sorry. And there were old sages who came and they were so joyous, saying, this is the savior of the world, and I have beheld him. So now I can pass away without any kind of feeling of inadequacy. When he was just a little boy, one day he was found deep in meditation. There was a kind of a new sowing ritual in India. We have the kings and all the courtiers, and everyone comes and they sow the first grains for the next season. So they kept on searching him. They couldn't find him. They found him in a tent, quietly absorbed in meditation. Yes, like Jesus Christ's parents were searching him. Where was he? And they found that he was in the temple speaking to the Pharisees and Sadducees. He was, as a prince, he was trained in the royal codes of honor as well as in the military. Since he was born in the warrior family, so he was trained in, and he was an expert swordsman, an expert strategist. He was highly intelligent. He used to meet itinerant monks and question them about life, what is truth, what is existence, and his character was impeccable. At 19, he married Yashodhara. The books describe her as she was noble-souled and beautiful. And they had a son called Rahul. He married her when he was 19. At 29, he left home. And that was, the story is full of pathos. That how he was looking long and deep at his sleeping wife, Yashodhara, and the son, Rahul. And he's torn between the two. Should I renounce the world and go? Or should I stay with my family, my loving wife and child? But this thing had always haunted him. Whether you stay at home and be just another king, or leave that home and work for the humanity. So the higher calling had taken over. There's always, you can say, in the lives of saints and sages, you always have this kind of conflict coming out. Should I stay, or should I go and sacrifice myself? And this has been the law for humanity. Those who sacrifice will rise up, will be remembered. He left. And it's been romanticized like he saw an old man, a sick man, and a dying man, rather a dead man, and he left. Why should existence be subject to these things? What are these transformations? What is death? It used to haunt him. But most of these questions about seeing the old man and the diseased man, it captured his attention, fired his imagination, and day and night he was trying to unravel why do we undergo these transformations. So he left at 29. He left the kingdom, which is Kapilavastu was now on the border of India and, you can say, Nepal. He left there and he came down to a place called Rajgir, where he became the disciple of one Alara Kalama. He studied the Sankhya philosophy. Dissatisfied, he goes to Uddhaka Ramaputra, and he was an ascetic. He becomes his disciple. He wasn't even satisfied with those teachings. He broke free and said, I am going to search this on my own strength. He left. For 6 years, he lived as an itinerant monk, practiced yoga, and as we know, he had reduced his food to just 1 grain a day. 1 grain of rice a day. And he had become extremely weak. One day, after he got up from his seat, he swooned and fell down. There was a young girl called Sujata who was going to some ancient, you can say, a grove to worship that deity. She saw an old monk fainted there. She was carrying a rice porridge, as I say. Yesterday, Adaya Prana, she gave us all this rice porridge. He ate that, fortified. He sat down with those words I said, I quoted in the beginning. Let my body dry up on the seat. I'm not going to get up from it. You see the strength of the person. He does not go and trying to pray to the gods or blame circumstances. Nothing. He is bent on trying to unravel the mystery of life and the mystery of death. And for that, he's saying, you are the best help. For the answers are there within you. No going outside. And he was a teacher who never pandered to the vanity of kings or noblemen or anyone or philosophers. He stuck to truth. And that is what we find his whole life being oriented towards discovering that. His life, of course, after he attained enlightenment, he became the Buddha. Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha under that tree, Bodhi tree. And for the next few years, he preached mainly in North India, and he gathered a vast number of monks and even nuns, of course. He was the first one to allow women into monasticism. There was an old tradition of Vedic monasticism for women, but he formalized it. And his followers numbered in millions. India is a vast country, and it's a populous country also. Till he passed away at the age of 80 at Kushinara, which is also in North India. Till the very last moment, he had to eat some poisonous variety of mushrooms, and that took him down. Even till the last moment, he's saying, everything you experience is a compound. These are compounded things. Diligently work out your salvation beyond the compounded things. And his great saying is, Atma Deepo Bhava. Be a light unto yourself So this is where you depend on your own strength. You don't really know how much you have within you. You've been told you're weak, you're limited, you're small, and you've started believing these things. This is one type of kind of hypnotism. Buddha says you have tremendous strength there. That's why be a light unto yourself and carry that light to others. His doctrine is very simple. It's called Chatur Arya Satyani. It's like the doctrine of the Four Noble Truths. It's called Arya Satyani. That is, in English we pronounce it as Aryans. It wasn't a race. Aryans were not a race like it was. Then they made a mess out of things. Yes, in the Bhagavad Gita and in the ancient books, an Aryan or Aryan is a person who's spiritually cultured. He is called or she is called an Aryan. So that is the meaning of it. So these are the Four Noble Truths of these Aryas. What? There is suffering. Yeah. Everybody we are old enough to know how much suffering. So what's new? But no, he said it, but he preached actually not suffering or dukkha, but sukha, happiness. He said, you can get out of this. So he discovered there is a cause of suffering. Dukkha samudbhava. And you can come out of this through nirvana. You can just extricate yourself. What ties us down? He's saying the third is, you can say dukkha nirodha. That is cessation of pain in the sense of, he gives the doctrine of dependent origination. Everything we do, we talk, we speak, we look, has a cause. And behind that cause, there's another cause. It's a kind of a chain of cause and effect relationship. You try to find out why you're miserable, you'll find that I have done certain things which probably I don't acknowledge or I've forgotten, but it is you who have set in motion certain things which are now coming to fruition. So every time, he says, whenever you see yourself in any condition, try to discover what exactly did you set in motion and then correct it or eradicate it, and don't repeat that. This will cleanse your being. So here he's saying, nature has given me this body or that education or this, nothing, this God has been to blame. No. He had discarded all these gods and all dependence on nature and everything. And then, okay, these are things that we also know, but then he also said, how do you get out of this? How do you extricate yourself from this suffering? It's simple. He's saying the eightfold path of, right views, right intentions, right work, right thought, right living, right meditation, right concentration, everything right. He wanted us to get oriented to that truth. Once we orient ourselves to the truth or to the pure being within, your actions will become correct. It has to be done consciously. Every time there's a tendency of the mind to stray, curb it, bring it back. That is the way. So this is a spiritual discipline in Buddhism and the core of spiritual. For thousands of years, there was a huge data on consciousness. In the Upanishads we find sages have been trying to discover what's consciousness and how it manifests itself and what is its nature. So Buddha took that data he also based all his teachings on the law of karma. There, as you sow, so shall you reap. And as he had gone to the very extreme, he said, that's not necessary. I did it. So you follow the middle path. Don't be too excessive in your spiritual practices, or don't get too lazy also. Keep a kind of a constant tempo of things. So that will lead you to, like Sri Ramakrishna used to say, like if you have a veena or a guitar, the strings too loose, you won't get any music. Or you tune it too tight, now will you get any kind of music. So it has to be just right. And that's what he said. Keep an even tempo. Now, when we talk about Nirvana, let's come down to Nirvana. So it is a transcendental state, like I mentioned, and it's a positive state, not the negative connotations like being extinguished. What remains of me? If I get extinguished, what remains of me? Nothing remains of you. But to come down to, there is something called a kind of a thirst. He called it Trishna. That is a kind of a thirst. I want to see things, hear things, smell things, taste, the works. And I'm buffeted by this constant, you can say, sensations that come in. My mind is kind of restless. Take the analogy of a lamp with oil that's burning, the flame there. You have a wick and a flame. Technically, that lamp should extinguish at one point of time because the oil will run out. But a mad career in this world constantly feeds that oil. And there is no end to the supply of oil, and you keep on burning and burning and burning and burning. But through right views, right intentions, right vision, right work, what happens is you stop feeding that oil in the lamp. And as the oil runs down, the flame is extinguished. That is the meaning of Nirvana. Nirvana, blown out, extinguished, everything is over, quiet. So what happens? But that is the false self that has been blown out. The false self that you have created. And that is which is responsible for repeated embodiments. Sri Ramakrishna says, even if you have a slight desire, you will have to be born. You would be born. Oh my God, things becomes a little tough there. Even a slight desire. So Buddha says, extinguish that desire along with your individual self-created existence. Your identity is all false because it is based on non-knowledge. You do not know your real nature. You should have built your individuality on that. You haven't. So generally what happens is Buddha was practicing meditation and austerities, and he attained enlightenment. What happened was he became Buddha, he became a sage. So it's obvious that that stage is something which gives absolute knowledge. Otherwise, he would have been the same like he was before the Nirvana, before the stage of enlightenment. So there is definitely a different kind of, you can say, state, a state of knowledge. He comes out, Swami Vivekananda says, a fool gets into samadhi and he comes out a sage. People say, I have had samadhi, and then they talk like fools. Then we have doubts about whether that person has fallen asleep or has gone into a state. There's a tremendous knowledge that is. But if Buddha did experience nirvana, how come he wasn't blown out? That is, extinguished his body. He retained his body. He came back. So there are two types of nirvana. One is the primary one, where you become the Buddha, the enlightened. You awaken yourself. The next one is when all the karma that has given rise to this body is attenuated, has been worked out, and then you get something what is called the final nirvana, parinirvana. And that's what Buddha experienced. So we'll say, how come he never got extinguished himself? And if he's preaching nirvana. No. So this is how the philosophers, nirvana is not something, not a new concept. In Shankaracharya writes Nirvana Ashtakam, the 8 couplets of nirvana. Hinduism had it. They call it Brahma Nirvana. Getting extinguished in Brahman. That is what is called Brahma Nirvana. Jainism has it, Sikhism has it, all the Indian religions have this concept of nirvana. What actually happens? So Buddha was sitting down, and trying to meditate. They say he sat down continuously for 49 days under that tree with that vow, I am not going to move from this until I attain that liberation. So he was sitting for 49 days. As he was on the cusp of enlightenment, his mind is rising higher and higher and higher to various levels of samadhis. Samadhis are various levels. We see nature. Nature is so beautiful. It's raining, of course, but it's so beautiful. And nature is sometimes even terrible or horrible. We see one side. We don't see the other side. So both nature is both beautiful, sublime, as well as terrible. It has to display all these things before you. This is nothing. We can come out of it. We can discern that this play of nature is not a big thing to extricate oneself. But nature throws out these sublime, beautiful forms in the mind of a meditator. You remember that Satan came and tried to tempt Christ towards the end? When Buddha was sitting down, Mara appears. Mara is the embodiment of everything which is opposite to nirvana. It is disease, it is birth, it is death, it is suffering, it is misery. The whole samsara. He didn't like the idea of Buddha getting out of his grasp. So even in the Upanishad they say, nature throws out these beautiful forms in front of the yogi. Very alluring. That yogi should not be enamored by these sights and sounds. So Mara comes. They say that he came with his 3 daughters. Some say 5 daughters. No real daughters, but then the forces of nature. One was greed, and one was anger, and one was fear, and one was pride, and one was ignorance or delusion. They all came. And they started dancing in front of him. Buddha was seated down. Buddha is unmoved. Then they tried another trick. They began weeping and wailing. They knew that this is what moved Buddha. His heart was full of compassion. He'll simply get up from the seat. Mara wanted to somehow get him away from that seat and get him away from meditation. Even that failed to distract him. The 5 daughters actually are the 5, you can say, forces of nature. They come in the form of, you can say, space. The first girl comes and she stands in front of Buddha, and she dissolves into space, and the space curls, wraps, expands, contracts, and goes to a different dimension. And Buddha is seeing this whole experience. There's lightning and thunder. Buddha keeps silent, keeps on watching. Space leaves in a huff. Mara's next daughter comes, and she is the wind, and she uproots trees and hills and rocks and clay and hurls them towards Buddha. And they come right up to his face. It is a kind of an illusion, and Buddha can see that. And the forces keep on tearing up the whole forest where he was sitting down. And there's terrible noises. Buddha keeps silent. He is doing what is called a vipassana. Vipassana is clear seeing. Pasha, to see. We generally don't see a thing clearly. We always have a bias. We always superimpose ideas or something like that. Or we've heard some old stories. Because most of our knowledge is all second-hand knowledge. So Buddha is seeing clearly through these illusions. Then the third force of nature comes in. She is fire. She comes and bursts into conflagration. And everything around the forest is burning and blazing. There's a huge conflagration. The fire reaches up to Buddha's seat. He is not frightened. He is unmoved. Then the water comes, and everything is lashed into waves. The sky is full of rain and it's pouring. The water rises right up to where Buddha is sitting. Once again, he is calm. Then earth comes, and this time I'm going to move him. And she comes with her earthquakes and volcanoes and tornadoes and the works. Everything, the rocks come hurling towards him. He sits down quietly. Mara leaves in a huff. Hey, no mortal could have done this. He leaves in a huff, but he is not done yet. He leaves, and Buddha is sitting down. Mara conjures up a whole army, and they all fire those missiles, the blazing missiles at him. And all those, missiles coming at him, they all turn into luminous rose petals, and they fall around him. Mara is still annoyed. So that's last trick up his sleeve. After a while, Buddha is sitting down, meditating. He sees himself as if he's watching his reflection in a kind of a body of water. As the water moves, the reflection moves. He's seeing himself as he tries to touch that kind of water, that illusory water, and a hand grasps his hand, holds his forearm, and Buddha pulls back, and an exact replica of Buddha is seated in front of him. And they are both looking at each other. Buddha is smiling. That other replica is frowning. Buddha says, the illusory, the replica says, "You go where no one has gone before. Will you take me along?" That's you go before. That's a Tathagata. You go where no one else has gone. Will you take me along? Finally, I have met you. Buddha says, you will not build this house anymore. The house is the body. You're not going to build. The illusion says, but you dwell in me. You have to take me along. Buddha says, oh, you Lord of my illusory self, finally, I am going to destroy you. And he banishes it with his insight. And Mara screams. That was his final, you can say. Screams and leaves. Buddha plunges into Nirvana, that blessed state. And he was so full of joy that after he emerged out of, for 7 days he just couldn't contain that joy. He kept pacing up and down. You don't need food and sleep and all these things. He just couldn't contain that joy. That is the joy of Nirvana. It's not a dry state. Oh, he goes to Nirvana, he gets extinguished. No. Then, of course, the story says that the gods came and requisitioned him. You now go and preach, and saying, I don't have time. I don't have any kind of competent persons that I can see. There's no one who can take these teachings. Then the god said, you dilute it a little. You've come. So what we have is a kind of oh yes, he was pretty strict about his followers, disciplining themselves. But of course, so here we are, Buddha, at 29, he attained that kind of illumination, to again mention Swami Vijnananda's, at one time he was in what is called Rangoon, Yangon now, about 45 miles from the capital. He goes to a Buddhist shrine. The place is called Pegu. And he's standing in front of the Buddha and he sees the form emerge, the form of the Buddha. And he's saying, so beautiful, so sweet, so loving, so calm. And he was so attracted towards that image that he was, he goes himself in a kind of a transcendental state. So his two experiences, one as Buddha with a kind of a form, a luminous form, and Buddha as an ocean of light. He experienced both of them. Swami Vivekananda, one time, he was young and he used to meditate, as a young child. Suddenly, one time, it was late evening, he had finished his meditation, and after meditation you get a kind of an intoxication, He was sitting down, trying to get his body and senses back on a normal, you can say, consciousness. He was young, I think maybe 7 or 8 years old. And from the wall emerged a calm looking monk with a, in monks in India we have this kind of a water, you can say, pot. He was wearing robes, the orange robes, and he was looking at Vivekananda, the boy, and he was about to say something, and the boy got so frightened, he leaped out of his seat and ran outdoors. And then he said, oh, why did I get frightened? He was about to say something. He returned. That figure had vanished. And he's saying, I was blessed to have the vision of the Buddha. So here we are. It's not that Buddha has gone away. The philosophy teaches that in each and every one of us, there is the Buddha nature. Each one of us is a potential Buddha. And he used to rebel against the idea, I am not anything divine or anything. I am just like you, a person like you. I have worked out diligently my own salvation. You also can do it. And all ideas of divinity he eradicated. No, nothing. I am just like you. So this Buddha nature is in each and every one. And we have something called the buddhi, the intelligence, what we call as intelligence. If it is rightly harnessed, if it is directed towards truth, we will find that gradually we are breaking some of our old illusions. Buddha took the plunge. We may not be able to do it, but we do it in stages, incremental. As we keep on practicing meditation or working with the right views and right effort and all these things, we slowly break our own illusions. We break our own imaginations and fantasies. And this is the process of awakening. It's a gradual process that may take years. But it doesn't matter. If we can get it even at the end of life, there we are. It is just the question of understanding that Buddha nature is in you and orienting yourself towards that truth. Because we are that stage of Nirvana. We are that. Somehow, some of our actions which have been done are burning us in a way, have been kind of a source of suffering and anxiety and pain. We have brought these things upon ourselves. We need to break our own illusions. So whether Buddha believed in self or God and all, those things, Sri Ramakrishna says, why do you call him an atheist? He couldn't express that experience. And that's the reason why philosophers said, he doesn't speak about the self, he doesn't speak. Vedanta also says that this self, the phenomenal self that we have within, is a kind of a reflection, a kind of illusion. It does not exist. Then what really exists? What exists is the Supreme Self. And when we realize that Supreme Self, that is called Nirvana or Brahma Nirvana. So it is clear that he was not a kind of an atheist, or he was against dogmas and doctrines. He just wanted us all to attain that state. Swami Vivekananda says he never did anything for himself, even as a child. That's a tremendous statement. You can see all his struggles were for all of us, those who will come in the future. I have found a way. Come out here. And so his character, which was based on total unselfishness, self-abnegation, he is the one we need to go to, because he is the light. When everything is extinguished, we see in our own lives how things slip between our fingers. Everything that we have done, everything that we have had all this life, we've got no control over ourselves. Things slip through our fingers, and we find the futility of just this running about in this mad world. I think there was a movie of that. When we attain to that knowledge, we will find that life was so beautiful and so joyous and so luminous. And what were we doing? Like a small patch of cloud hiding a massive sun. We know a small patch of cloud cannot hide a sun. It's just that it's closer to us, and that's why it appears to hide the sun. Similarly, that patch of cloud has to go, and it will go, of course, even if you don't do anything about it. Clouds don't stay. It will go. But if we want to hasten it, if we want to be a blessing to ourselves, to the world, we struggle on the right path, and that is the Buddha path. That is the Buddha nature. And every one of us worship that real self of us. It is not an image that we worship. That is external. That has been given to us to support our wavering mind. We actually worship our own Buddha nature. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat.